What if all it took to be seen as an expert was a suit and a sales table? Well, that's exactly what happened to me working at a personal development event quite a while back now. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the principle of authority and how that principle can make or break your credibility as a speaker, how we can utilize it, leverage it effectively and ethically, and what to avoid doing. We'll take a look at how authority is also sometimes used unethically. Welcome to Present Influence, the show for professional speakers and communicators who want to impact, influence, and inspire. My name's John Ball, and I'm your guide on this journey to mastery-level communication skills. Authority is one of Dr. Robert Cialdini's 7 principles of influence, and it's the tendency that we all have to follow the lead of people who appear to be experts, leaders, or people in power. Now, Cialdini will often use the example of people wearing white coats, and I think that's a fair one to use. You'll tend to see them in medical environments. And when we see somebody in a white coat, we automatically start making assumptions that they are probably medical personnel. They probably know what we're doing. So it gives us a level of confidence that we can trust them and that they are who they say they are and they're where they're supposed to be. Now, we may see those white coats in other environments as well. So, for example, we might see them at the nail technicians, we might see them at the opticians, we might see them at the beauticians and other places too. And there's a reason for that. It's not necessarily that these people are medically trained and need to have the white coats on at all. It's more a case of the confidence and trust, the assumptions that come along with the white coat in those environments. The sign of cleanliness, the sign of assumed technical ability and knowledge that comes with that, the assumptions that we make about them. So we're more likely to do what someone in a white coat says to do than if they weren't wearing that. And this was proven in experiments that Cialdini talks about in his book, where these were essentially set up with actors, some in white coats and some of them playing the part of subjects in these tests. And unsuspecting people were brought in to follow instructions from the people in the white coats as part of the experiments. They believed that they were administering electric shocks to the subjects who had agreed to have this. The subjects were only pretending to be electrocuted. That is really important to know here. However, one of the things that this experiment showed was that a significant percentage of the people who were administering or thought they were administering electric shocks were willing, under the instruction of the person in the white coat, who they thought was a doctor or professor, to keep turning up the electrical shocks, some of them to what would, if they were real, would have been lethal levels of electric shock. Now, not everyone agreed to this, but certainly a significant percentage. And that is the power of authority. We may be looking at it in a little bit of a different context here. However, Cialdini said this: titles, clothes, and trappings are all symbols of authority, and they can trigger our compliance without genuine merit. So picture this with me. I was standing at a sales table at the back of a personal development event, wearing a suit and promoting something that was called a Billionaires Club. Really what it was mastermind group where people could come, and it was a significant investment for people to join this, and they would go somewhere exotic as a group, and they would have special guest speakers come in, they would mastermind their projects, they would do some kind of community outreach whilst they were there, and really was stepping into the mindsets and the actions of being millionaires, multi-billionaires, billionaires, and so on. So I'm standing at the table to promote this event and sign people up because I was essentially there to work on sales. And some of the people who were attending the event made assumptions about me. I'm assuming that they didn't recognize that my suit was from Marks and Spencer's and that my tie was borrowed from my dad. But what they thought was because I was in the suit and tie, looking smart at an event where most people were in jeans and t-shirts, and the sign says stuff about millionaires. I can't really remember if it's millionaires or billionaires now. I think it might have been billionaires. They assumed that I was a millionaire or multimillionaire because of that, based purely on my appearance and my positioning at that event. There was no intention to create a false idea of me being a millionaire or multimillionaire or anything like that. It was an idea that people got. And I certainly did not try and leverage that. I just found it amusing, as I was very far from being any kind of millionaire or multimillionaire. So I think it's a good idea to reflect on perceptions that are created, and at the very least, have a little bit of healthy skepticism in our lives, if only to consider the assumptions that we're making and to remind ourselves those assumptions might not be true. The more opportunities in life where we can add a little bit of conscious awareness and thought into things, the more healthy our brains are going to be, and the less likely we are to fall for those times where people might be using authority principles to pull the wool over our eyes and to give us a sense of them being something that they're not. So consider the assumptions of authority and that they may sometimes be false. Now, one great example of this I've seen in a bunch of YouTube videos was people selling these tours in particular places, tourist destinations around the world. And often they were selling fake tickets or weren't genuine resellers, but they would have things that made them look like they were, maybe a blazer, a gilet or something that would have some branding on it, an umbrella that has the right coloring and branding on it, but they weren't actually legitimate sellers. And so they were scamming people for their tickets. And so again, the assumptions were made. They look the part, they have their gear on. Why else would they be wearing that? And yet they were ripping people off. So I think healthy skepticism is often a good idea. Now, there are a number of ways that speakers can project authority. And so we're going to look at three key ones here. And let's explore the aspects and the speaker expressions. The first one really would be around appearance, which includes things like your dress, your posture, your vocal tone, your physical presence. The next would be association, who you share the stage with, event status, testimonials, those kinds of things. And the third would be expertise. So that could be something like sharing demonstrated results, sharing credentials, case studies. If you were to include all these elements in some way, shape, or form into your talks and presentations, they are likely to give you a credibility boost. So looking the part, standing like you are, speaking like you are, having a presence that says you are everything you say you are is going to be good. We want to make sure we're doing that. Who we are on stage with, like who we associate with, because there's so many reasons why that's important. But when it comes to authority, if we're sharing stages with people who are less than ethical operators or who are really just in it to grind every dollar, euro, pound out of their audience that they can, we are going to be guilty by association. However, if we're sharing the stage with people who are pros, experts, really great at motivating and energizing the crowd, we are also going to be guilty in a good way by association. I do think we're in a point in life and in business where expertise is probably much less important than it ever has been. However, we still do respect and recognize expertise when it shows in front of us. Now, if you are a speaker who also does coaching or consulting, sharing some of your results that you've had with clients or people you worked with, sharing some of your credentials. Credentials sometimes can be your experience that has led you to the knowledge that you have right now. It's not always qualifications. Could be case studies, or not necessarily even your own case studies, but things that back up what you're talking about. It's all still going to give additional credibility and authority to who you are and what you do. There is a degree to which anyone who steps up onto a stage in front of an audience, or anyone who being presented as a guest speaker has been invited to come and talk or present, is automatically, by those associations, being assumed to be an authority, to be an expert in what they do. So you are crossing what we could call the authority or expert threshold when you are up in front of a group. So unless you do things that undermine that, you will probably be considered or thought of, and people will make those associations that you are who you say you are. But if you were on a stage talking about high level business concepts and you're in Bermuda shorts and a Hawaiian shirt and flip flops, it's going to undermine your authority. So we must think there has to be congruence in what we say, how we look, and how we present ourselves on the platform. Now, we said there was a dark side to authority as well. And as with any of Cialdini's principles, the tools of influence, or weapons of influence, as some people will call them, can be used to build or to destroy. They can be used for good or they can be used for bad. In and of themselves, the tools are amoral. They have no morality of their own, which means the morality of them depends on the person using them and what they're using them for. So we may encounter things like speakers who claim false credentials. They may have, they might be talking about a degree or doctorate that they've awarded themselves or was honorary and doesn't really make them the experienced expert that they're talking about. They may well overstate their success, and they may even fake testimonials. We have probably all come across, I'm happy to say, I think it seems to be less common now, but the people who are trying to project a level of authority and status, we can pretty much sub out the word authority for status in many cases, of the people who would be filming sales videos with Lamborghinis that, when it was investigated, turned out to be rented, or hiring out a mansion so that they look like they're multimillionaires, hiring models to hang around them so they look like they're surrounded by beautiful people. All these things were commonplace 10, 15 years ago. Thankfully, not so much now. But all those things have damaged over time and chipped away at people's trust, which is why we are now in a bit of a trust deficit, especially when it comes to expertise and marketing ourselves as speakers and any products or services that we have. Audiences don't always question things if it looks legit. And so often it's only when people get found out, and word will spread like wildfire if people get found out. If trust has been broken, people will find out. And I've seen it in the personal development industry, people who were trying to look the part, people who actually got themselves into massive debt trying to project this image of status and authority. So they show up somewhere with a hired Ferrari or Lambo, had £10,000 spent on a suit from a top London tailor or fashion designer that they couldn't really afford, so that they could look the part and hopefully, I guess, try and pull the wool over people's eyes. That is really where one of the places where authority can be pretty dark. I hope that you're a bit more like me and that you wouldn't want to use authority unethically. Let's talk about how to use it the right way. Being an authority isn't about pretending. It's about earning trust and presenting it authentically. So there are ways that speakers can build ethical authority. You can share real credentials and results. Use real storytelling to show and not just tell about your expertise. Be vulnerable and transparent about what you can and can't do as well. I think people often think there's this need when you're on a platform, when you're in public view, that you should be flawless, and it's unachievable. And it's also unrelatable. So we can actually get more authority by being a little more vulnerable. And I've talked about this in videos before, just by maybe talking about something that we can't do or something that we failed at and learned from, that lets people in and say, all right, they're not perfect. Actually, you like me, I'm not perfect either. And so when we're not trying to be perfect, we become automatically more relatable, so long as the things we share aren't undermining our general credibility. So authority is really a way of allowing other people to do some of the heavy lifting when it comes to your credibility. Cialdini said this: true authority is earned through expertise and trustworthiness, not just appearance. So if this has helped you to rethink how you show up as a speaker, or how others might be influencing you, or how you might be influencing others, leave a comment below. And of course, if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, because certainly there's more in this series to come, as well as guest interviews and more videos. Would love to see you subscribe. I've just hit 300 subscribers, which has been something like 50 people in the last month or so to take it up from where it had been stuck for years. I'm looking to get to 400 now, and I'd love you to help me do that. Now, if you want to find out what your speaking strengths are, you can take my Speaker Strengths Finder assessment, and you can find that at presentinfluence.com. Next time, we're going to be exploring social proof and how other people's opinions affect credibility, and how speakers can leverage social proof from the platform and make sure things are set up to make you look as good as possible. Again, not perfect, just great. Wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, have an amazing rest of your day.